It started with that second accident. I burned my face very bad. We were working in an underground vault and we made some switching errors and I ended up blowing myself up essentially. It cross phased 4,800 volts of electricity and it was 4,500 volt amps of current. And I was in a ball of flame for 2 full seconds. I thought I was dead. And those 2 seconds that it was going off, time slowed down immensely. And it was in the hospital. I was in the hospital for 10 days in ICU in the burn ward. And it was those lonesome times. It was during COVID. The accident was April 27th, 2021. So I didn't really have much visitors until the evening. So it was a lot of reflection, a lot of self-doubt, and a lot of guilt. I held a lot of guilt because my other partner got burned also. And it was during that time of healing physically that I truly learned how to heal myself mentally.
All of us are going to have a vice or two from one degree or another, but depending on how deep these vices go, they can and will take over our lives. And it can be incredibly challenging to break free from them. Some do, while many don't. Now, what if you're on top of that, and then life throws you not one, but two glimpses at dying? The mental fortitude to change your life gets real compelling, doesn't it? And today, we're going to hear just about how my guest turned his life around. Now, before we get into all that, I just want to remind you, if you're interested in raising your standards as a father, a husband, and an entrepreneur, then I encourage you to start your Hero's Quest. This is our 90-day program where you will ultimately accomplish more, develop more, and become more in the next 90 days than you ever have in your life. You can get more information about this at the Awakened Man Training Academy at members.theawakenedman.net. And with that, let's get on with today's episode.
The average man today is sleepwalking through life, many never reaching their true potential, let alone ever crossing the finish line to living a purposeful life. Yet, the hunger still exists, albeit buried amidst his cluttered mind, misguided beliefs, and values that no longer serve him. It's time to align yourself for greatness. It's time to become a revolutionary man. Stay strong, my brother.
Welcome, everyone, to the Revolutionary Man podcast. I'm the founder of the Awakened Man movement and your host, Alan DeMonso. So let me ask you, what vice or vices do you have in your life? And how much do they impact your daily life? Breaking free from our vices can be a life-changing event for us. And while we work towards fighting the demons that once controlled us, there's still opportunities for us to learn even more about ourselves. So allow me to introduce my special guest today, Daniel Spencer. Daniel's been through hell and back and living a sober life for over 12 years now. Starting in his teens, he abused marijuana and alcohol right through to his late 20s. And while carrying almost 300 pounds of weight on top of that. Now, Daniel is also a survivor of 2 electrical accidents that almost killed him. Today, he's been married for almost 20 years, has 3 kids, one's been adopted, and he's just about to share his entire story and what we can do to change our lives around. Welcome to the show, Daniel. How are things, brother?
Blessed every day. How about you?
Same thing here, man. Same thing here. Good, great to hear. Well, as you know, in our work here at the Awakened Man, we always talk about everyone being on a hero's quest. And while I revealed some of your story to our listeners here today, I just want to dive a little bit deeper into that aspect of it and tell us a little bit more about what inspired you to pursue the life you're living today, how that experience shaped you into the man you are and the work that you're doing.
Absolutely. Like you mentioned, it started with that second accident. I burned my face very bad. We were working in an underground vault and we made some switching errors and I ended up blowing myself up essentially. It cross phased 4,800 volts of electricity and it was 4,500 volt amps of current. And I was in a ball of flame for 2 full seconds. The circuit breaker we were working on failed and it took a little bit more time for the high side breaker to open up. And finally, after the noise ended and the white light turned off, for a quick second there, I thought I was dead. And those 2 seconds that it was going off, time slowed down immensely. And I was thinking all these things in my head, like, hey, I thought we were supposed to have system protection. Why aren't you dropping down? And then ultimately I had this thought, like, you're probably going to die here. And then it stopped. And it was in the hospital. I was in the hospital for 10 days in ICU in the burn ward. And it was those lonesome times. It was during COVID. The accident was April 27th, 2021. So I didn't really have much visitors until the evening. So it was a lot of reflection, a lot of self-doubt, and a lot of guilt. I held a lot of guilt because my other partner got burned also.
Mm.
And it was during that time of healing physically that I truly learned how to heal myself mentally.
Yeah.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead. I was just making a note here. Was just wondering, what it must have been like what it must have felt like to have that thought that, here's how'd you put it? What's that moment going to feel like when you felt like you're going to possibly die is what I wrote down. I just thought that did it feel like it was lasting a lifetime? How did that moment feel for you?
I was scared. I was scared. It was because up to that point, right before I had told him to close the switch in, you have that conscious voice in your head that tells you the difference between right and wrong. And we weren't following our work procedure the right way. We weren't communicating at all.
Mm.
And a voice popped in my head and said, "Hey, why don't you call for your toolbox and you can stand on that and you'll be in the right position." But I let my ego take over. I let my ego. I said in my head, you've done this before. This isn't your first time doing it.
Yeah.
You know what you're doing, but ultimately, I paid the price.
Yeah. Yeah. And thankfully you didn't pay the ultimate price because it gave you an opportunity, as you said, with all that time, recovering in the hospital, giving you an opportunity to really reflect and think about life. And so what were some of the things that you were thinking at that time that started to shift the perspective? As you talk a lot about mindset in your work, and just want to touch on that for a bit.
Yeah, the shift started. It started. I think it was my second night in the hospital. I had called one of the other crew members that was there and asked him how everybody was doing. Because I was still concerned for my brothers at the yard.
Yeah.
Everybody else still had to go continue to do the work, and he said, everybody's kind of bummed out, but everybody's sense of awareness and safety is back up.
Yeah.
So I was trying to find the silver lining in it. And when I got back to work 5 months later, and well, even during that time in the hospital, I shared my story. Because I was taking pictures the whole time. As soon as I climbed out of the hole, I sat on the bumper. I was taking pictures.
Mm.
I was taking pictures in the hospital when they peeled the burnt skin off my face.
Yeah.
Right after my first surgery, I woke up from my first surgery, my first skin graft surgery. I took a photo. Everything was bandaged up. I took a photo and I took the bandages off. I was taking photos along the whole way. And I shared a couple of those photos from like the first week while I was still in the hospital on Instagram. And then some other line Instagram pages, they reposted it.
Mm.
So I was getting messages, DMs, well wishes, questions, what kind of PPE were you wearing? What was the voltage? What type of switch? And that's kind of when I realized that, you have to share this because we have accidents, small little incidences that happen and, nobody gets hurt. Nothing gets, way blown out of hand. But this one I couldn't hide it. I couldn't keep it a secret. I wore it on my face essentially.
Yeah.
So sharing the incident and having everybody from the industry ask questions, it's like, I'm going to help a bunch of people, because I had a balaclava face mask that I could have worn. It was in my truck. But again, my ego told me, you don't need to wear it. So even I was getting messages from people saying, "Hey, you know what? Thanks for sharing that. I have one in my truck. I'm going to wear that when I switch," or I might not be, following all the safety rules all the time. And now I'm going to. Thank you.
Yes.
And that kind of really brought my spirits up a whole lot.
Mm.
Shifted my perception on the type of worker I am,
Yeah.
the type of man I am. It's my first accident that I had, that was, I believe it was 2011. It was the same thing. We were working some temporary 2700 volts, and the connection that they were going to use, I was like, it doesn't sound like a good idea the way they're doing it, but I never spoke out on it again. I think at that point, it was probably just because I was still an apprentice. I was fairly new into actually doing, live work. And back then I was drinking a whole lot. And ultimately the thought that I had about the connection is why me and another partner ended up getting burned, And back then I right when I got home, I just started drinking again. I didn't know how to handle it back then, but, in the second accident, I had been sober just over 10 years. So that wasn't an option for me anymore. I already knew in my head, we can't go there.
Right.
So I tried working it out. I mean, I was already into fitness for about 3 years. So the moment I could, I would, just dealing with the pain emotionally and internally, I would just try and lift weights more.
Yeah.
But I would have nightmares, and then I started seeking therapy, and that helped a whole lot. That had, yeah.
Absolutely, Daniel. I just a couple notes here. I just wrote down here. First off, just the whole sense of brotherhood when you started posting that on Instagram. And I don't think, I don't know, I won't put words in your mouth, but the first thought that went through my mind is that, do we even recognize the depth of the brotherhood in the work and the things that we choose to do in our lives and how we can affect so many people when something like this happens? And I think, kudos to you for having the guts to post that and to show it to the world. I've seen your Instagram feed, and I just want to say that, when you look and doing it coming from such a great place that you did that in terms of giving opportunity for people to learn, right? And who among us has not done stuff and not followed all the steps and whatever it is that we're doing? And I raise my hand here and just go, how many times have I, been on the roof and had the ladder not properly secured and have it, wobble. I don't have proper tethering, like lots of stuff that we just do in our lives. And we just take some things for granted. And it takes life altering occurrence for us to stop to think about, what's truly important, because had the ultimate outcome come for you, now there'd be a widow and children that would need to be looked after as well. And so how did this last accident impact your wife and your kids?
It was rough. It was very rough because my wife tells me, she's like, after the first one, she didn't want me to go back to work. And even more so after this one, my injuries were far more, they were worse. My injuries were worse this time. And she's like, well, what are you going to do? I said, I don't know anything else. So the whole time I'm off, I'm thinking, I'm still scared to go back to work, because, we hear stories of the things just blowing up randomly.
Yeah.
And so while I'm off, I'm contemplating, what are you going to do? Is there another way that's going to sustain your lifestyle without having to put yourself in this danger anymore?
Yeah.
But essentially I just went back, and, I think for her and the kids, maybe my kids kind of hid their emotions or their fear quite a bit, but my wife's always been really open. And once I started therapy, and, it helped me communicate a whole lot more.
Yeah.
I was able to communicate with her better about, what I learned and my progress going forward. Speaking about it a whole lot with the safety section, I would go to a bunch of the safety meetings to speak at the presentations.
Yeah.
For my accident. And after a while, I was thinking, you can't stop talking about it, because I think it reminds me every day. I have some scars on my face that, every time I get up and brush my teeth, I think about it. And the more I think about it, I always say, holding on to your past is going to stop you from reaching your future. But, we should never forget it.
No.
Because it's always something great to learn from.
100%. Absolutely. It can be the teacher for us, right? And what's so powerful about listening to you tell your story and reading about it is that you have such strength. And we talked about getting onto the call today is, really about that. It really resonates with me that you have this real stoic ability really to face what's difficult right in front of you and be able to move forward with it. And I think, kudos to you. And I talked about in the opening monologue about all of us having vices. And so let's go back a little bit. And you had to fight through those as well, or earlier on in your life as well. So what's been the hardest part for you right now in dealing and staying sober and managing your sobriety?
The hardest part, I don't know, maybe just being around family members or seeing people, talking to people that say they want to change. They say they want to give it up. And I tell them, you just need something to replace that habit. It's not doing you any good. It's going to break your family apart. For me, it's not even a thought anymore. I came to terms with what it was going to do to my family. It almost split my family up. My wife was getting ready to leave me. The night I quit drinking, I drove home drunk with my kids in the back seat. And, I told myself, you can never put yourself not myself, my kids in harm's way. I never want them to see me drinking and knowing that they see dad's okay when he drinks, or he still goes to work every day and he comes home drunk.
Yeah.
Maybe it's okay for me to do that.
Yeah, no kidding. And what a different, changing that perspective for your children as well, right? Because what are the stories that they're telling themselves? And so for you to have that insight into to consider having to change that. And thankfully, that your wife decided to hang around just long enough to see this transformation that you've done. And it's just so cool. I really like how you also said you need to find something to replace that habit. And I think we all have things in our life. For me, I was a chef for a number of years in my career, so I just love food, and it's my thing. When I feel stress and there's like too much stress, then I tend to fall towards, well, I'm going to go and raid the fridge and eat more than I should. And so we all have our things, right? And when we can consider, is there something that I can do to replace that habit? What's a more healthier way to move ourselves forward? And you're showing that, in spades.
Yeah, for me, it's turning to physical activity.
Right on.
That helped me when I was feeling down, when I was off, like I said, when I was off at work. And now if something I feel it's gonna set me off, I try and release that negative energy in a positive way. And that's usually some push-ups or some pull-ups, something that I don't really need equipment with, 50 burpees. When I feel the tension between me and my wife is gonna start kind of boiling over, I take a breath and I said, I'll be back, and I'll go to a different room and do some push-ups. For me, it's physical activity.
Right on.
It's pushing your body through that pain, because we don't want to hold on to that pain, and working through that in a positive way is the best action.
Yeah, absolutely. So now we're talking about your physical fitness program, and that's a big part of your life. How did that come about? Because you in the introduction there, we talked about at one point you were 300 pounds. So what was happening in that time of your life when you recognized that was another area that you needed to change? How did that transformation occur?
That started when I quit drinking. Actually, I actually about 2 years ago, I kind of tallied up how much I was drinking per day, and I was drinking well over 1,500 calories alone. So it was when I quit drinking, I changed my eating, because I'd wake up with a hangover, and even at night, I'd be drunk and go get some tacos or burritos or something like that. My wife would constantly tell me, Daniel, you wake up not breathing, like you wake up with no breath. I'm like, sleep apnea.
Yeah.
I'd have constant heartburn. So once I quit drinking, I lost 60 pounds without exercising, just changing my diet. But the diet was not sustainable, right? It was a fad diet. And one of my best friends had joined a boot camp, and he lost over 100 pounds. And that was inspiring to me, right? I was like,
sure.
At this point I was 260 pounds, and I said, I'm still not happy with, the way I look, and the way you perceive yourself is the way you're going to feel, right? The way you feel is the way you're going to look.
Yeah.
So me and my wife joined that boot camp, and I lost about 75 pounds. And that was my new addiction.
Right on.
Like I said, replacing that negative one with the positive one, it's the best thing. And when I had my accident, my second accident, I couldn't really work out because of all these bandages on my face. I wouldn't even go to the store, because of the embarrassment that I was wearing.
Yeah.
So I would get up early and run. I would go on runs like at 4 a.m. And once the bandages came off and I felt like I was confident enough to go out, I joined the gym again. I, went to the same gym that I went to and still ate. I wasn't my meals and my nutrition wasn't on point, but I never missed a day of workouts. And me and my wife went to a music festival, and I was getting a bunch of compliments, and I side eye looks, good ones. It boosted my confidence way up. And finally, there was this life coach that I had been following on YouTube and Instagram.
Yeah.
And I reposted one of his stories, and he sends me a message, and he says, "Hey man, let's get you on a team." And I said, "Yeah, absolutely." So he sends me his program, and it was just to be a client of his.
Yeah.
And I said, I know how to work out. I know how to, meal prep and meal plan. I want to help people the way you helped me, because I had been watching his videos, and they're really hardcore, really, calling yourself out on your flaws, holding yourself accountable for every action that you regret.
Yeah.
I said, you know what, man, I want to help people the way you helped me get through these bad times. The way you inspired me is how I want to inspire other people. So I joined his coaching program, and that was a whole different game changer. Learning how to count macros instead of just grams of protein.
Yeah.
I got really lean. I got shredded. And my confidence went way up again. And during our first meeting, he says, I'm telling him, it's basically like a Zoom meeting, and telling him my story. And he says, "Man, you have a hell of a story. You've overcome quite a bit, and there's people that need to hear it." So I had already had my Instagram page, but then he was explaining to me how to share my story and how to resonate with people. And ever since then, I've been helping many people, not clients alone, but just other, people sending me messages. "Hey man, I appreciate you, consistently getting up every morning and consistently posting a workout in your foods." I have probably about 15 clients right now, and they're, dropping bad vices. They're gaining confidence, self-esteem.
Nice.
I have one client who's been sober almost 6 months since he joined this program, which is, it's to me that really touches me personally.
Sure.
And not even just other people saying, "Hey man, I've lost 20, 25 pounds, just taking your advice, eating different, taking my food to work instead of buying out every day." That's really, it really fills my soul. Like, I used to always take so much, be selfish with what I wanted.
Yeah.
And that's why I say now I take care of myself in the morning from 3 a.m. to 6 a.m. That's my time. That's my time. Everything else I do after that, even during that time, it's for everybody else, because I record every step of the way.
Yeah.
And try to set the example. We all say we don't ever have time. You just don't make the time.
Yes.
Right. You just don't make the time.
Yeah, absolutely. You're absolutely right. And that makes so much sense, right? Because we think that the time that we have is our block of time that we give ourselves every day. We don't think about how we can reshape that and make room for the things that are truly important in our life. And so you started talking about some coaching clients, and that's really what I wanted to get into next. Tell us a little bit about the coaching work that you do and the program, and how that's transforming your life and others.
Yeah, I say, I'm not certified in nutrition, or I don't have a certificate saying I'm a certified trainer. I call myself a life coach. I've overcome certain things that a lot of people in my trade, in my line of work, deal with daily, even people that aren't in my line of work. So I say, it starts with the mindset. You have to really want to make the changes. When you look at yourself in the mirror, or you reflect back on some of the actions that you took if you're not happy with them, that's what you need to change. Right? As soon as you feel regret for what you did, whether if it's, you ate too much at a buffet, or, you're treating people on the freeway, the wrong way, cutting people off. You can always turn it around, helping yourself is the first way to do it. And then helping other people, right?
Yeah.
It's going to fulfill you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I was saying also as I was creeping your socials and having a look at stuff, and that I noticed that one of the things that also helps you with your transformation and physical fitness, you were talking about nutrition, is that you use some First Form products. How have those helped and benefited your nutrition and in the work that you're doing?
Yeah, I joined First Form in November, and they've been really educating me about supplements, and using quite a bit of their products now. And I've gained some good size, some good lean muscle. Andy Fercella is, he tells it like it is,
Yeah.
which is exactly how I do it now. Before I was very reserved. I wouldn't speak up on things. I would just try and brush things off. And now, hey man, if I don't like it, I'm gonna let you know. If I see you're not doing something right, I'm gonna let you know. They're a great company to be with. I have a link to them on my Instagram page. But one of my work truck was stolen a while back ago, and a bunch of my stuff was stolen, some of my personal items. And they sent me a box of supplements and a personalized leather-bound journal and handwritten notes. And most companies might not care about something like that, right?
Yeah.
But it really showed that how much they truly do care. I have a vitamin stack that I do, post-workout stack. They coached me a lot about, when to supplement and what to supplement with. People always ask me, dude, when do you sleep? Because I go to bed at like 10 at night and I get up at 3 in the morning. When do you rest? I really don't. I don't. If there's work to do, I'm going to do it. But having the proper nutrition and proper supplements to help you recover faster, it's key.
Yeah, absolutely. It's all about that, right? When you feed yourself with the proper fuel, then it's amazing how much more energy you have. And so I'm not surprised at all to hear that you have that kind of energy and that kind of resilience. So at this point, you've been working, you've worked through a bunch of stuff, and your marriage has really gone through a ton of stuff. What's been the hardest part for you guys being married and going through all of this that you have?
I think the hardest part is it's probably my impatience. It's probably my impatience, my stubbornness. Absolutely. My wife is one of the most patient people that I know. She says, I tell her all the time, actually, I tell her, you saved my life. Because when we met, I was 20 years old. I was not happy with myself. At that point, I was thin, but I was in a relationship that I thought I was in love. I wasn't. And she came in, I met her at work, and I never wanted to leave her side since then. And her resilience is actually it's way stronger than mine. But I think for the biggest trouble is my stubbornness, my impatience. I'm very impatient sometimes, and sometimes I speak out of turn. That's why they say you have 2 ears and 1 mouth, so you can listen more than you talk.
Yeah, absolutely, brother. Absolutely. Well, kudos to you for recognizing that, because there's lots of us in relationships, and when we think about them, we're having troubles. We're not always able to pinpoint our part of it, and when we do, it helps us understand what's going on. And our wives are just perfect mirrors, in my opinion. I think my wife always is able to show me where I need to be better, how I can show up better. And I think that's a gift. And when we see it that way, we truly put the work in, then it's amazing how the relationship changes. And it sounds like you guys have got that down as a great tool for yourselves. That's awesome. Go ahead.
Yeah, we've gone to counseling before. We've done it before, and it helps. But actually practicing what you learn is the best way to get through it. Being open, being vulnerable. I was never vulnerable. I would never speak up, or not even speak up, but just tell her how I feel. And I said ever since my accident, and you had asked, kind of the resiliency is like, you know, a huge part of my ego, all of my ego, I say my ego burned up and it died in that ball of fire, you know,
Mm.
and I just learned to become more vulnerable because of the injuries I sustained and the openness that I was with it.
Man, absolutely. What a powerful line there. Your ego was burned through that fire. And I think, we can all think of, if we can just think back of the times in our lives where we were in the fire, and could we allow ourselves to just burn away that ego part of us that doesn't allow us to be vulnerable, doesn't allow us to show up, and then see the difference that happens, the growth. Because really after that, I grew up in the prairies, and so there was lots of times in the prairies where we would burn stubble. And why you do that? It's about returning different nutrients back to the soil so that you can have more sustaining crops for the future. And I think it's so important that we recognize that. And I just love it. That was so beautiful, so beautifully put.
Thanks.
Of everything that we've talked about, Daniel, maybe there's something that we didn't get a chance to touch on. If there was one thing you'd want our listeners to take away from our conversation today, what would that be?
If you're having troubles, if you're having regrets in your actions, seek advice. Seek somebody that's done it, somebody that's been through it, somebody with the experience. Let that ego go and ask for help. There's definitely lots of stories out there of people that have overcome the same thing you have.
Yeah, absolutely. And they don't know that until we share our story. And you've done that on your Instagram feed. And I think that's so awesome. And you're doing that with your clients now. And so I just want to say thank you so much for spending time with me today, Daniel. And I know we were able to show people that no matter what happens in our life, that we can always recover if we've got the right mindset. And so if men are interested in getting a hold of you and get involved in your programs, like working with you as a coach, what's the best way for them to get a hold of you?
The best way would be Instagram. My Instagram handle is reps and double time. You can just search that, or Daniel Spencer. I'm the dude with the hat and no shirt on. Facebook. I'm on Facebook, Daniel Spencer. And if you need anything, man, I'm here for you. That's what my true purpose is. My uncle says, you're here for a reason, and I found it. It's to share my story and help other people.
Absolutely. Well, I'm going to make sure all that information is in the show notes today, so folks get an opportunity to reach out to you. I just want to say once again, thank you so much, Daniel. You're an inspiration. Keep up the great work, my friend.
Thank you, Alan.
Thank you for listening to the Revolutionary Man podcast. Are you ready to own your destiny? To become more the man you are destined to be? Join the Brotherhood that is The Awakened Man at theawakenedman.net and start forging a new destiny today.